The trio of mercenaries sat around a bonfire, flames crackling as shadows danced across the clearing. They were killers from different corners of the galaxy, but only one of them had the restraint to stay silent. Varnak couldn't stomach the argument unfolding before him any longer. Zunari, a Stranik, and Bulgar, a Trovaxian, were deep in yet another debate about which of their species had rightful claim to the title of apex predator. The arrogance was unbearable. Zunari laughed first, a wet, bubbling sound as his toxin glands released their usual secretions, staining the soil beneath him. "Strength? That's your argument?" he said, gesturing at Bulgar with a dripping finger. "Brute force is obsolete. Biology is everything. My species conquered entire continents with just our skin. One touch, and death follows." Zunari's green speckled hide shimmered in the firelight, each shift in color an evolutionary marvel that made him lethal. He spoke like the galaxy had already crowned him king. Bulgar paused mid-bite from a haunch of roasted beast. The meat crunched in his massive jaws, bones turning to splinters. He set it down, stood to his full towering height, and slammed one foot into the ground. The impact sent tremors rippling outward. He spoke, voice like a boulder grinding downhill. "Real predators don't rely on venom. They dominate through presence, through action." And with that, he returned to eating as if he'd ended the discussion. But Varnak simmered in silence, not from fear. From memory, he remembered a spaceport tavern when a human female, barely tall enough to reach Bulgar's mid-chest, had rushed toward another of Bulgar's kind. Her face had lit up in glee. "Oh my God, it's like a walking teddy bear," she'd squealed before asking to pet him. Before petting him, that hardened, scar-covered warrior had frozen like a statue as she ran her fingers through his fur, cooing over its fluffiness. The entire bar had watched in stunned silence as a feared predator became a domesticated novelty. And now here were Zunari and Bulgar, arrogant, blind, and entirely ignorant of the species that truly changed the rules. Zunari continued, oblivious to Varnak's rising frustration. "My people engineered viruses that wiped out entire food chains. We didn't need strength. Evolution perfected us. That did it." Varnok stood with a hiss, his tail lashing the ground hard enough to scatter embers into the air. "You're both wrong," he growled. His violet eyes burned as they met each of theirs. "Neither of your species holds that title. And if you weren't so infatuated with your own egos, you'd already know which one does." Predictably, they laughed. "Zunar," I wheezed, the toxins now puddling near his feet. "Let me guess," he sneered. "You think the Nomari are apex predators? With your twitchy tongues and flair for drama?" Bulgar chuckled, fangs gleaming. "What are you going to do, Varnok? Smell us to death with that tongue of yours?" Their mockery echoed across the clearing. Varnok didn't flinch. His sidearm cleared its holster and leveled between them in the blink of an eye. The laughter died instantly. "I wasn't talking about my species," Varnok said, his voice quiet. "I was talking about humans." The stillness that followed was total. Even the wind through the trees seemed to pause. Zunari's toxins doubled in output, a clear fear response. Bulgar's fur bristled, eyes wide. "Lower the weapon, Varnok." Zunari said quickly. "No need for this," Bulgar added, his deep voice cracking. Varnok tasted the air fear pheromones, thick and unmistakable. Slowly, deliberately, he reholstered the pistol and sat back down. "Humans," he repeated, staring into the fire. "You want to know what makes them different? I could tell you stories. First-hand stories." Neither of the others moved. They sat, tension thick around them, the bravado gone. "You've worked with them?" Zunari asked at last. Varnok nodded. "Multiple times, and," Bulgar rumbled, "tell us." He let the silence stretch, savoring their discomfort. Then he spoke. "My first time meeting a human was on a mercenary contract from the Council. Simple enough on paper. Drop onto a jungle death world, Track a high-value creature, bring it back alive. What world? Zunari asked, intrigued. HFY, Varnock replied. You know of it? Both shook their heads. You're lucky. HFY isn't just a death world. It enjoys killing you. Gravity sits at 1.4 standard, just enough to wear you down. The air is so humid it feels like drowning. The local fauna? Aggressive, venomous, and smarter than you'd think. He leaned forward, letting the firelight catch the sharpness of his scaled features. Vines that strangle, flowers that release spores into your lungs. Insects the size of your thumb that can paralyze with a single sting. And the rain? Acidic enough to melt most alloys. Bulger shifted uncomfortably. So why send a human? Zunari asked, genuinely curious now. Varnock grinned. Because the council wanted a Connor captured alive. Ever heard of that? Blank stares. Picture something with 6 legs, claws like monoblades, thick armor plating, jaws that can unhinge to swallow a grown warrior whole. And just enough intelligence too. Make it unpredictable. And they sent you and a human to get it. Bulger said incredulously. Me and a human named Sam, Varnock said. Just Sam. Humans like short names. Never did learn if it was short for anything. Zunari still looked skeptical. What was he like? Insane, Varnock said fondly. While I was reviewing survival maps, Sam was laughing at something on his datapad. Sighed. Sounds like a great time. I thought he was broken. Was he? No, he was human. We landed, suited up, and he moved through that jungle like it was a vacation. Where I saw death, he saw curiosity. They listened in silence. I was collapsing by day 2. He was still exploring, still taking notes, tracking insects, recording predator calls, teaching me how to move through terrain I'd trained for. He didn't just survive HFY, he enjoyed it. Zunari leaned forward, toxin forgotten. How long until you found the Connor? 6 days, Varnock replied. And what we found? It changed everything. Varnock shifted slightly on his rock, tail twitching as he remembered. The Connor had made its lair at the base of a cliff. The cave entrance was huge, big enough to swallow a small dropship. Bones littered the ground outside, many of them, belonging to species I couldn't even recognize. The stench gods, it was thick with rot and predatory musk. Every instinct I had screamed to turn back. What did Sam do? Bulger asked, leaning forward despite himself. He checked his gear, Varnock replied, and said, well, time to meet the neighbor. Then he walked straight into the cave. Alone? Zunari asked, incredulous. For the first 3 days, Varnock confirmed. I stayed outside. Cowardice, if I'm honest. I set up base camp, kept watch, but never went in. I could hear sounds from within, movement, growling. The occasional thud like something slamming against stone. But no screams, no gunfire, just occasional laughter. Laughter? Zunari echoed, stunned. Varnock nodded solemnly. On the 4th day, I couldn't take it anymore. Shame overpowered. Fear, I went in. The fire between them hissed as a log cracked in half. Neither of his companions moved. The tunnel twisted deep underground. Smooth walls, polished by years of passage from something large. I moved slow, every sense on alert, my weapon drawn. When I reached the main chamber, he stood up, compelled by the need to physically demonstrate what came next. It was huge. Bioluminescent fungi lit everything in pale blue. The ground was carpeted in shredded fur, most likely. And in the center, Varnock paused, glancing at both of them. There it was. The Connor, lying on its back, massive, nightmare-made flesh, and Santini, grinning. Sam was rubbing its belly. Both Zunari and Bulger erupted. You're lying. Zunari sputtered. There's no way. Bulger's voice boomed. I have the footage, Varnock said calmly. Helmet cam recorded everything. They stared at him in disbelief. It was like watching someone play with a dog, he continued. Sam was using that ridiculous high-pitched human voice. Who's a good boy, huh? You are. And that killing machine was wagging one leg in the air. No species can do that, Zunari insisted. Not without drugs, not without control pheromones, some tech something. There was no tech, Varnock said. Just Sam being Sam. He named it Rex. 3 days. That's all it took. He didn't tame it with tricks. He connected. Somehow he made that thing feel safe. Bulger looked shaken. It could have killed him instantly. It should have, Varnock agreed. But it didn't, because humans have this gift. They bond, instinctively, even with creatures designed to kill them. And they do it with such ease, it scares the rest of us. Zunari shook his head. That's just an animal. Lots of species tame predators. That's not unique. Then let me tell you about the second time I worked with a human, Varnock. Saad, voice low. And this time, it wasn't about creatures. It was about people. He sat back down, letting the flames catch the silver edges of his scaled face. Years later, I got hired for a corporate job. Not by the council. This was more delicate. A high-stakes infiltration on a Kradari syndicate. You know the ones? Bulger grunted. Honor-obsessed warriors with a black market empire. Exactly. Our objective was to steal a data crystal 1 containing the routes for their entire trade network. The catch? We couldn't use violence, couldn't leave any trace. They had to not realize it was missing until we were systems away. Zunari frowned. You don't send mercs for that. You send spies. Unless the merc happens to be named Evan, Varnock said. Human again. Evan preferred Ev, shortened, casual, typical. And he was good? Zunari asked skeptically. Varnock's grin widened. He walked into that gala like he owned the building. The Kradari boss was throwing a reception for new business partners. We knocked out a pair of invitees en route, used their credentials. Walked right in. What happened next? Bulger asked. The venue was a masterpiece glass dome, 3 moons visible through the ceiling, alien aristocrats everywhere. Ev wore something stylish, just enough to show respect but not grovel. And in under 5 minutes, he had them all enchanted. Zunari blinked. How? By being human, Varnock said. He told lies so convincing, even the Kradari elders laughed until they cried. He flirted with the boss's daughters tastefully. Debated politics with generals. Charmed the old warriors. Made fun of himself just enough to disarm them. Bulger's brow furrowed. That's just social engineering. Manipulation. No, Varnock said. It wasn't manipulation. It was connection. Ev didn't adjust his tactics like a schemer. He adjusted himself. Became whoever each person needed him to be, and they loved him for it. And the crystal? Zunari asked, voice quieter now. We had a plan. Ev would befriend the guards, get us access. He mapped the compound, memorized patrols. Everything was ready. And then, he backed out. Backed out? Bulger echoed, just like that? He said he couldn't do it. Not anymore, Zunari snorted. Lost his nerve. No, Varnock said softly. He fell in love with the Kradari boss's daughter. Silence. Are you joking? Bulger asked, stunned. Varnok shook his head. Myra, the youngest daughter. Ev didn't just fall for her. He confessed everything to her. His identity, our mission, our employer, every detail. Zunari made a choked sound. He signed his own death sentence. I thought so too, Varnock admitted. But then he went a step further. He asked to marry her. Bulger looked genuinely horrified. To marry her? He walked into the boss's chamber, unarmed, alone, declared everything. Admitted the plan, the deception. Then told Mira's father, I came here to steal from you. But I stayed too. Build something better. What happened? Zunari whispered. The clan wanted him dead. Mira's sisters called her insane, but Ev spoke for hours. He quoted her childhood poetry, talked about her art, her dreams. He offered to take their warrior trials, to learn their language, their rituals, everything. And they let him? Bulger asked, voice hushed. Eventually, Varnuk said. He stayed. Months passed. He proved himself. Saved one of the clan's children during an attack. Forged alliances, closed trade deals. 6 months after we were supposed to flee with stolen data. He looked between them. I attended his wedding. Varnuk paused as he let the weight of his words settle. The fire between them had burned low, casting long flickering shadows across the clearing. Neither Zunari nor Bulger spoke. For the first time since the discussion began, they weren't just listening, they were absorbing. I stood beside Ev at that wedding, Varnuk said quietly. Mira wore a ceremonial robe stitched with the glyphs of her ancestors. Her father, High Blade Varek, personally led the rites. And Ev? He looked happier than I'd ever seen a mercenary look in my life. But how? Bulger finally asked. His deep voice, barely more than a rumble. That doesn't make sense. My people, we value loyalty and kinship. Yes, but something like that. Crossing species, cultures, politics, and blood oaths. That shouldn't be possible. Exactly. Varnuk replied. It shouldn't be, but humans, they don't follow the rules the rest of us live by. They form bonds where logic says none should exist. That's why they're so dangerous. Zunari shifted uncomfortably. It still sounds unrepeatable. A rare fluke. One emotional outlier doesn't make a pattern. Varnuk smirked. Oh, you think it stops there? That it's just pets and lovers and quirky bonds? You're not thinking big enough. That's why I saved the last name for last. He leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. Have you ever heard of a woman named Alira? Zunari blinked. The Alira? Bulger sat up straighter. The ghost of Garad Station? The assassin who shut down an entire terminus system. For 6 days, Varnuk smiled slowly. Yes, that Alira. Zunari's voice lowered to a whisper. That's just a myth. A legend. Nobody even knows what species Alira is. Some say she's not real at all. She's real, Varnuk said. I met her once. Both mercenaries froze. Varnuk reached up and touched a small scar beneath his right eye. 3 years ago. I was on protection duty for a corrupt executive. He'd made enemies, paid for elite security. I was part of the response team. Zunari leaned in slightly. And she came through a sealed window, Varnuk said. Let me repeat that: a sealed window on an orbital station. No alarms. No breach warnings. She didn't hack in. She didn't sneak through access tunnels. She stepped through a window. He paused. Killed my client in one motion. One cut, silent, precise. Bulger's mouth opened, but no words came. She looked at me, Varnuk continued. Just looked. No weapon drawn, just this. Calm presence. Red hair, bright as a warning light. And then she smiled. She smiled at you? Zunari repeated. Dumbfounded, like we were old friends meeting for tea. Then she said no hard feelings. Just business, and stepped back out into open space. Without a suit? Bulger asked, eyes wide. Varnuk nodded. Disappeared. Evaporated from every sensor. And my recording? I tried to sell it. The buyer disappeared before the deal went through. The next one got assassinated. I kept the footage after that. Never shared it again. Zunari's face had gone pale. You're saying she's human? I'm saying I saw her face. Her scent, her eyes. Alira is human. Bulger swallowed hard. But that would mean that the most lethal assassin in the galaxy belongs to the same species that pets predators and marries alien daughters. Varnuk finished for him. Yes. They sat in silence, the fire reduced to glowing coals. You see now why the Council calls them the final evolution? Varnock asked, his tone measured but firm. Humans don't specialize like the rest of us. Zunari, your people, master toxins. Bulgur, yours master strength. Mine? We manipulate terrain and temperature. But humans? He tapped the side of his head. They adapt. They can be soft or terrifying, kind or cruel, diplomatic or deadly. Not one path. All of them. Bulgur grunted. That's just versatility. It's choice, Varnock corrected. And that choice? That's what makes them dangerous. When a Vosk is born, it will be a warrior. When a Stranik is born, it will secrete poison. But when a human is born, no one knows what they'll become, not even them. Zunari nodded slowly. They can blend into anything, become anything. That's why the council's divided, Varnock said. Some think humans are the future. Others think they're the galaxy's most insidious threat. Because every time you think you understand them, they redefine themselves. The wind whispered through the clearing. Maybe that's why they're so good at connecting with others, Varnock continued. Because they change to fit. Their empathy isn't just emotional, it's strategic. They learn how to be what you need, then you drop your guard, then they win. But what do they want? Bulgur asked after a long silence. If they're so adaptable, so clever, so capable, what's the end goal? That's the terrifying part, Varnock said. Some just want friends, others want peace. Some want to conquer. Some just want to see. He stared into the dying embers. Humans have a saying. The sky's the limit, but they build ships and reach beyond that. They don't stop. They never stop. If evolution had a destination, it would look like them. Zunari slumped back, overwhelmed. Are we even predators anymore? He muttered. Bolga, remained silent. For once, the giant mercenary had no retort. You asked why the galaxy calls them the final evolution of predators. Varnock said, standing up, because after them, no one wants to see what comes next. A shooting star arced across the sky. Or perhaps, Varnock thought, it wasn't a star at all, but another human ship en route to charm or terrify yet another unsuspecting world. Asterisk. Varnock stood by the dim glow of the fire, its fading warmth doing little to dispel the tension in the air. Zunari and Bulgur sat in stunned silence, no longer posturing, no longer scoffing. Their arrogance had burned away alongside the last of the flames. He let the quiet stretch between them. You've heard the stories now, he said softly. Not from rumors or galactic forums, from someone who was there, who survived being close to them. Bulgur exhaled slowly, shaking his head. I always thought strength was the measure of a predator. But if you'd asked me an hour ago if I feared humans, I would have laughed in your face. Zunari's toxin glands had slowed, his secretion reduced to a mere sheen on his mottled skin. His voice, when he finally spoke, was thin. I thought manipulation was power. Now I wonder if that's just one trick in a much larger playbook they've already mastered. Varnock said nothing. He didn't need to. The realization had finally taken root. They're shapeshifters in spirit, Zunari said, eyes unfocused. Empathy one moment, lethality the next. Varnock nodded. That's what makes them terrifying. Not because they're better at one thing, but because they're capable of all things, Bulgur grunted. But why do they do it? Why befriend a monster? Fall in love with an alien, spare a rival? Or kill so efficiently it looks like performance art? Is it instinct? Strategy? Varnock's tail twitched. I've asked myself that 1,000 times. And I think it's because they can. Zunari frowned. That's it? Varnock glanced toward the stars above. Every other species evolved to fill a niche, a role. But humans? They refuse to accept limits. They're born, and the galaxy doesn't tell them who they'll be. They decide, and sometimes they choose to pet the monster. He turned to face his companions fully. and sometimes they choose to become it. The air turned colder. Somewhere, in the distant forest, a creature called out a low, predatory growl swallowed quickly by the night. You said the council doesn't know if they're salvation or threat, Bolger said. But what do you think? Varnock let that question sit for a long moment. I think humans are the mirror the galaxy was never ready to look into, he said at last. They reflect the best and worst of everything. Compassion and cruelty, bravery and recklessness, joy and destruction. He paused, eyes glinting purple in the low light, because what terrifies the council isn't just that humans can infiltrate, seduce, or kill. It's that they can love you while doing it. And mean it. Bolger looked haunted now. That assassin. Illyra, you said she smiled at you. She did, Varnock replied. And I believe in that moment, she meant it. That it wasn't personal. That I was just another part of the puzzle. Not a threat, not a target. Just a bystander she chose to spare. And yet, he touched the scar again. I've never felt closer to death. Zunari spoke next, his tone strange, less sarcastic, more reverent. And Sam? The one who tamed the Connor? What happened to him? Varnock smiled faintly. He stayed on Tharsis Via, set up a research outpost. Said he wanted to catalog the entire ecosystem. When I left, he was training the Connor to respond to verbal commands. Called it his big dumb puppy. And Evan? Bolger asked. Did he and Mira? They still live on the Kradari homeworld, Varnock said. Last I heard, he was being considered for a diplomatic envoy role. Mira runs the clan's trade arm now. Apparently, humans are very good at making deals, especially when they've already stolen your heart. That drew a dry chuckle from both mercenaries. A sign of the weight lifting slightly. And Illyra? Zunari asked. Do you think we'll ever see her again? Varnock shrugged. I think we won't know if we have. That's the problem with humans. They can be anything. Anyone. They might be the stranger you shared a drink with yesterday. Or the shadow that brushes past just before the alarms go off. He met their eyes one last time. You don't see humans until they want to be seen. And by then, it's too late. Bolger slowly stood. So what now? What do we do with this? Knowledge? Warn others? Spread the truth? Zunari remained seated, his eyes still wide. Would anyone even believe us? Varnock gave a slow, sad nod. Maybe, maybe not. But it's better, you know. Better that someone else understands why. The galaxy gave them that title. He turned away from the fire, watching the stars. They're not just predators. They're not just explorers. They're not just killers, lovers, diplomats, or warriors. He gestured at the night sky. They're all of those things. At once. And whatever comes next in the evolutionary chain ... It'll come from them, or because of them. Behind him, the fire had finally died. No smoke. Just glowing coals, and the occasional spark, drifting upward like a ghost escaping gravity. Zunar. I stood and walked toward his tent without a word. Bolger lingered a moment longer, then rumbled. Next time someone asks what species to fear ... I'll have an answer. He followed after. Varnock remained alone, gazing up at the sky, where a single faint light streaked across the void. Maybe a meteor, or maybe a human ship. He wasn't sure anymore, and he liked it that way. He smiled to himself. The others would sleep uneasily tonight. But not him. He already knew the truth. He'd seen it with his own eyes, felt it in his bones. Humanity didn't just survive in the galaxy, they thrived in it, and the galaxy, whether it admitted it or not, had already begun to change around them, because after all the centuries, all the wars, all the terrifying apex predators that once ruled their corners of space, now there were humans, and nothing was ever going to be the same. Asterisk.